in the work of cosmic discovery. Smartphone apps are probably going to be central to this, and while to the people in this room it's obvious that hardware and software are equally important to the success of a project, this is something we might have to share with a broader community. Computer resource limitations are no longer an issue. They used to be, but they're not now. Nevertheless, it's a long and complicated road between instrumental raw data and an app running on someone's phone in an unusual part of the world. Today and tomorrow, I hope that together we'll be able to imagine how this exciting work might get done. So here's the sort of shape of things. I'll talk about what Paolo mentioned, the state of the world today, and then how we can respond to these special opportunities that there are. First of all, what we want to do, how we're going to do it, and can the United Nations play a role in this? I think it can, but this is an obvious thing. The UN will do something if it can help us all do better in astronomy and space science. If it turns out that after these discussions this is not the case, I think it will be the case, but it's up to us to judge collectively. We're here to help, not to replace or do anything. We're here to promote science in the world. Open Universe is the name that we came up with. It, I think, encapsulates what this is all about, and it's all about doing science by providing new services for people. I think it can be argued that scientific software has been undervalued, but now that these resource limitations, apart from the cost, have gone away, it's up to us to say, what are we going to do with these new opportunities? Over the last 30 odd years or so, some magnificent progress has been done, particularly in astronomy, by the VO and other things. But now we have an opportunity to do even more, to welcome more people into the scientific enterprise. How do we do this? We do this by deciding together what are the responsibilities of data providers. I've written this down as consolidated obligations, but there is a reflection. I think there will be a reflection in our business in what's happening in the wider economy, where manufacturing industry is essentially like providing the data, and more the service economy is becoming prominent, which provides people with what they want in personalized ways, and this is something I think that we have to do as well. Who will benefit from this? A whole load of people, not just you and me, but people learning, but also people with a general interest in science. And if we can open up the development process to a whole load of other people, even the private sector may come in and contribute to this effort. Again, can the UN play a role? And I say yes, it can. It has enormous authority in cultural terms and political terms, and if it can help bring astronomy and space science to more people, it will have done its job. So what might an open universe inspired expansion look like? The potential is enormous, limited only by our imaginations, and I think that if we can bring astronomy to people's mobile phones, then this will be a very exciting event, not as a spectator sport, but as participation in cosmic discovery. How are we going to do this? We can only do it together and by the development of, I think, lots of new software. The cost is obviously going to be an issue we have to tackle head on. How much is how much money is it going to take? And if this means, as Paolo suggested, a small rearrangement of the way projects are planned right from the beginning, with financial resources put in a slightly different place, only small adjustments required, this will be a good thing. The outcome will be good for science, good for people, good for sustainable development, but good, full stop. We are in, whether we like it or not, I like it, some people don't, the era of open data. Here's some selective chronology of starting at the bottom and moving upwards of some events in the the open data landscape. Some people claim that the introduction of the smartphone about 10 years ago has fundamentally changed economies in basic ways, and I think they're probably right. You do many more jobs on your mobile phone that you used to do in other ways with bits of kit, and this is a resource that I think that we need together to see if we can exploit it as a means of scientific discovery. I've put for these articles or other bits of stuff associated with openness, sometimes you have to pay for them, so I've, just in case you want to go, I've put the price on there as well. But one of the big things in 2012, the Royal Society in Britain issued a paper, Science as an Open Enterprise. Then the G8 a couple of years later issued an Open Data Charter. There was a famous paper at the end of 2015 about data science, and so on and so on. But open data's here, and we must embrace it. What does open data mean? Some of the ideas, the basic principles, are encapsulated, taken over from the G8 declaration, which oddly enough is only available on a United Kingdom government website. It means that they haven't got the means to distribute it in any more sensible way. But these ideas have been taken over by something called the Open Data Charter, and you can see here their 6 principles, the first of which is probably the most important. Open by default. This is something, you can see all those, and you can click to get your organisation to adopt the charter. But one thing that might be missing from here is the idea that Paolo mentioned of transparency. So the data from space, from astronomy and space sciences, is complicated. These are simple principles. They only tell you the very surface of the sorts of things that you have to think about. It's a complicated business, but a complicated business, it means you have more scope for your imagination. Here I've put down 22, as it happens, ideas. They're only ideas. They're things that I think that should be incorporated in the services that are offered to people. We can talk about any of them if you like. There's some long words there. Recontextualization is a word that I made up, but it means that people want stuff, you should show it to them how they want, instead of somehow some central thing. Personalization. There's now client-centered services, I think, is one key concept, so that people decide how they want stuff. We can go through all this stuff if you want. I imagine that we'll be talking about this type of thing, but here are some ideas. You may have many more, and I hope you do, and I hope we'll this process is a consolidation of what an archive means, what services it should offer, how it should work. And I think there are some things which are to be avoided, this is happily a much shorter list, and possibly even complete. Duplication it covers many things. We have to be as efficient as possible. Errors should be eliminated, but probably the big thing that is relevant to open data is the thing at the bottom. Privilege, it says. My personal opinion, it's only a personal opinion, is that in the modern day I see no place for PI-only missions. Stuff, work that's financed through taxpayers. The data should be open but by default. So I'd like PI missions to be a thing of the past. Here is a very dense slide. It showed you some work that I did even longer ago than Paolo mentioned. This was 30 odd years ago, I spent about 4 years, starting in 1984, to essentially make a single page of a table in AppJ, it was a complicated business. There's no reason at all why these results shouldn't be derived from the basic data with a single click. I would like anyone to be able to do the Einstein survey of the Wolf-Rayet stars just by going tap. And this shows you some of the details that need to be under the hood, under the bonnet, which so you've got a list of Wolf-Rayet stars, so you can see at the top of the table that Wolf-Rayet 5 is there, so that means numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 were not observed. There are other names. It identifies the data that Einstein took on these Wolf-Rayet stars when they were taken, and some analysis done. And some physics at the end, some physical parameters go in there, but this is a purely mechanical process, and there's absolutely no reason at all why it shouldn't be done from someone's mobile phone at the far ends of the earth, and they see this as well. Be better to visualize it probably, but this is one of the ambitions I see that it would be a good idea to share with as many people as possible. When you give a name, and I've used a Google, you put a name in a box. I've used a Google box because we're all familiar with it, and it's a sort of neutral thing. Lots of people supply boxes in which you can put the name of your favourite star. WR140 is my equivalent of Paolo's Markarian 421, but I put WR140 in there. I give it to the care of this box. What do I want the box to do? Well, the box has to do a whole bunch of things. It has to translate WR140 into something that it can use, and the name resolution services we have now are absolutely brilliant at this. So the coordinates come out and a few other stuff, so and that's one job that is done beautifully now. Relevant data notification, so I only want to know about the places where data were taken and not any irrelevant stuff, is done slightly less well, but that should be done with footprint services which are under development, and they depend on the particular instrument and the time. That's only a job that can be done centrally properly. And then what data are there? So there's both raw data, but catalogues means data that have been already processed. Someone's done some hard work of making images or spectra or time series of these things. This work has to be done centrally and then made available and identified and supplied to me because I've put WR140 in there. And there are other jobs, and all these jobs which are expert jobs should really be done centrally and then be made available in advance and made available, draw nice pictures. But Google is a good thing to use because it does lots of things behind the scenes. It makes a complete history. It remembers what you did. And I think we need services which remember what we have done, the whole of our scientific careers, essentially. And so we can go and recall a query that we did a year ago and get exactly the same result. So everyone's environment becomes their personal environment in which their whole scientific life is encapsulated and remembered and is tuned to look just the way they want it. Personalised services, client-centred services being the key. So the key concepts that here is a list of, again, ideas. You may have more which drive the Open Universe Initiative. The world's archives are full of undiscovered scientific treasure. There's stuff in there which no one has seen, which is brilliant, and we've got to make it as easy as possible for it to get out. Open science is here, although it must be said that there are some people that think, for various reasons, ethical, practical, that open data is not a good idea. So I think we have to consider those counter-arguments and make the case for open data. We know that computer resources now are not a problem. Client-centered services are something we have to do, and so on and so on. Mobile devices are something that we haven't really exploited yet, and I think we have to together think how they can be used, not just to make our lives easier, but to include a much broader set of people doing real astronomical and space science. And of course, all this stuff has to work in many languages. I have a notion that there should be a data model out there which is the complete human observational history of the universe. Every single observation ever made should be somehow retrievable and fitted into the broadest picture. How can the UN help with this? Maybe it should have a version of an open data charter. What does open data mean for archive services? Here, while looking through UN stuff, I came across this discussion of what the UN itself is for in the broadest possible terms. The UN is about governments, the governance, and I think these provide a suitable model for what the UN might do in the more limited sense of space science data. Only technical experts can do the necessary thorough groundwork. That's us. Only heads of governments can do other things, and only universal organisations can legitimise the grand bargain. So there is some structure that we can follow. So open universe science. It used to be hardware limited. Now it's possibly software limited, but when the software limitations disappear, the universe, as far as the open universe is concerned, the sky's the limit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the word is on United Nations representative.
Thank you, Enrico, for the introduction. And I would like to thank you also, Paolo and Andy, for the very nice introductory presentation or keynote presentation on Open Universe and the comprehensive introduction of what this expert meeting is about. I'm not an astronomer myself, so I'm not going to give examples of what I did 40 years ago with the stars, particularly because I was not alive 40 years ago. But I would also like to thank all participants for being here, and on behalf of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, to welcome you once again to this expert meeting and for your support of the Open Universe initiative. I'm going to try to keep it brief. We're already running late in our schedule, so we will try to keep these introductory statements as brief as possible. And also, I would like to kindly ask you to keep that in mind during your presentations, to try to be strict with the time allocated, which is mostly 20 minutes per presentation for both presentation and follow-up questions. So if you can stick to 15 minutes for your presentation, that will give us ample time for discussion and questions right after each of them. We have really 2 exciting days ahead of us, packed with really a great number of exciting presentations, and I really hope also very lively and productive discussions. As presented today by Paolo and Andy, there's been an exponential increase in the amount of data collected by space science missions, and in the context of Open Universe, we are mostly understanding this in the broader sense to include astronomy, planetary, and solar system exploration missions. But this trend is not unique just to astronomy missions or to space. This big data revolution is extending to all aspects of society, and we have as well observed it in a number of different fields. In these big data revolutions, it's basically all among us, and some communities are doing much better and providing access to this data in a user-friendly and transparent way. We have as well observed the explosion in the number of users, or the desired explosion in the number of users. We have to think about and try to cater as well for the growing community of citizen scientists, not just the professional scientist community. And this is only expected to grow even further. We're expecting professional scientists, but as well educators, amateur scientists, and the public at large to benefit from access to astronomical data. And as we have seen, the archiving, maintaining of these archives for legacy data, the handling of this data, processing, distribution, and accessibility of this data, but also the generation of services and other applications that can be accessed in a user-friendly and transparent way poses very challenges for the near future. And I hope that's one of the things we will be able to discuss during these 2 days, to see this transition from open to transparency, to see this transition from science-ready to web-ready. And me personally, and also the United Nations through its Office of Outer Space Affairs, I've always have a strong feeling also for open data myself. and the office has a strong commitment to facilitate the access of all communities to open data, particularly also communities in developing countries, and also to access the benefits of space science and technology. This Open Universe initiative, initially proposed by Italy last year during the Committee of the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, embodies this commitment, and by promoting open and transparent sharing of data, and by seeking to engage the international community, but also the wider public, in the marvels of astronomy and science. Given the potential for inspiration, education, but as well capacity building, which is one of the focuses of our Office of Astronomy and Space Science, I truly hope that this initiative will become a landmark of the future Space 2030 agenda. And I look forward, as I have said already, to the various presentations of this meeting and to hearing your thoughts on how can your organizations contribute to this initiative efforts and to the benefit of all society. As Paolo has mentioned, next year, 2018, Unispace Plus 50 will mark the 50th anniversary of the first Unispace conference in 1968. The outcomes and recommendations of this meeting and the preparatory event that will follow up in November, after refinement of these recommendations, will be fed into the process next year during the COPOS session, but also during the segment dedicated particularly to Unispace Plus 50, to this celebratory event 50 years after, to plan the next 50 years of the work of the Office for Outer Space Affairs and space exploration in general. And your contributions to this process is most valuable and very much welcome. My opening remarks are more or less done. Coming back to logistics, on Friday you receive the second to last final version of the program. In here, if you have not seen it, we have an updated version with a few small changes with respect to the version on Friday, so you may see some changes in the timing. And this has also become obsolete since this morning, because I think there's already been a change. Mark Allen's presentation has been moved to the afternoon because I think a presentation in the afternoon, service presentation, has to be moved to the morning because of a previous commitment. So yeah, if you have any changes or if you notice that there's anything wrong in this last program, please notify us as soon as possible. We would also like to be very grateful if you could provide us with electronic copies of your presentations if they are available, whether in PDF or removing any sensitive information that you want to take out. And unless there's any other logistics announcements to be done, I don't want to keep you any longer. That's all for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For logistics, we have a coffee break more or less at 11:14, a morning break. We should have the